I never believed in fate until that night in Seattle. The rain hammered against the hotel window as I stared at the single queen bed, then at my worst enemy, then back at the bed again. This has to be a cosmic joke, I whispered. But that night changed everything between us. And if you're wondering how a simple booking error led to the most unexpected love story of my life, keep watching. If this video hits 50k likes, I'll share the unedited footage of our first awkward breakfast the morning after. My name is Maya Chen, and 6 months before Seattle, I met Jackson Reed on what should have been the best day of my professional life. I had just landed my dream job at Horizon Media, a cutting-edge digital marketing agency in San Francisco. After years of freelancing and building my portfolio, I finally had an office with my name on the door and a team to lead. I wore my lucky blazer, arrived 30 minutes early, and walked into the conference room ready to present my vision for our newest client. That's when I saw him. Jackson Reed. Sitting in what should have been my chair, at the head of the table, smiling at my team. "Everyone, meet Jackson Reed," my boss announced. "He's joining us from our New York office to co-lead the new accounts division with Maya." Co-lead. The word felt like a slap. I had been promised full creative control, not a babysitter from New York with perfect hair and an Ivy League smile. When our eyes met across the table, I knew immediately, this man was going to be a problem. "Looking forward to working together," Jackson said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile didn't reach his eyes. I could tell he wasn't any happier about this arrangement than I was. The next 6 months were corporate warfare disguised as collaboration. Jackson rejected my ideas before I finished presenting them. I accidentally scheduled meetings when he had important client calls. We competed for everything: better office space, team loyalty, our boss's approval. The tension was so thick that people would find excuses to leave when we both entered the break room. "You're undermining me," I hissed one day after he changed my presentation without consulting me. "I'm fixing your mistakes," he shot back. "Maybe if you spent less time trying to prove you're better than everyone, you'd notice your strategy has holes in it." I hated his confidence, his expensive suits, the way he could charm clients with stories about his travels. I hated how he always had a comeback, how he never seemed rattled. Most of all, I hated that sometimes, rarely, he was right. Then came the Seattle project. Horizon's biggest potential client, a tech giant looking to rebrand. Both Jackson and I wanted to lead the pitch, but our boss had other ideas. "You're both going," she said firmly. "And you're going to present a unified front or neither of you will have a job to come back to. I'm tired of the tension. Fix it or I'll fix it for you." The flight to Seattle was silent torture. Jackson wore noise-canceling headphones and pretended to sleep. I reviewed my notes and pretended he didn't exist. We arrived during the worst rainstorm Seattle had seen in decades, both soaking wet by the time we reached the hotel. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be a problem with your reservation," the receptionist said, looking uncomfortable. "We only have one room available." "That's fine, we booked 2, Jackson said, his professional smile firmly in place despite the water dripping from his hair. "I understand, sir, but with the tech conference in town and this storm grounding flights, we're completely booked except for one room. It does have a queen bed." I laughed. It wasn't funny, but the absurdity of the situation hit me all at once. "You've got to be kidding me." "We'll take it," Jackson said, surprising me. "Unless you'd prefer sleeping in the lobby, Maya?" The room was small but nice. 1 bed. 1 chair. 1 bathroom. And 12 hours until our career-defining presentation. "I'll sleep on the floor," Jackson said immediately, dropping his suitcase. "Don't be ridiculous," I replied. "We're adults. We can share a bed without it being weird." I was determined not to show weakness, even though the thought of sleeping next to him made my stomach twist. We worked separately that evening, me at the small desk, him sitting against the headboard. The silence was different now, less hostile, more awkward. When I went to shower, I realized I'd forgotten my pajamas in my rush to pack. I emerged wearing the hotel robe, feeling strangely vulnerable. Jackson glanced up, then quickly looked away. "I can turn around if you need to get dressed." "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. Nothing about this was fine. Eventually, we turned off the lights and lay as far apart as physically possible on the queen bed, a wall of pillows between us. I could hear him breathing in the darkness. "Why do you hate me so much?" he asked suddenly, his voice quiet. The question caught me off guard. "I don't hate you," I said automatically. "Come on, Maya. 6 months of Cold War says otherwise." I stared at the ceiling, considering my answer. "You took half of what was supposed to be mine." "I didn't know," he said. "They told me I was being transferred to lead a new division. I didn't know about you until that first meeting." "Really?" I turned to look at his silhouette. "Really? And then you looked at me like I was the enemy, so I just became what you expected." The confession hung between us. Outside, the rain continued to pour. "I worked so hard for that position," I said finally. 7 years of building my reputation, of proving myself in an industry that still sees women like me as diversity hires rather than talents. And then you walked in, and everyone immediately respected you. Is that what you think? Jackson shifted to face me. "Maya, everyone at Horizon talks about you like you're some kind of marketing savant. I've been trying to keep up with you for 6 months." I blinked in surprise. "What? Why do you think I'm so hard on your ideas?" "Because they're usually brilliant, and I'm terrified of being outshined. I came from New York because I hit a ceiling there. This was my second chance." The honesty in his voice made something shift inside me. For the first time, I saw Jackson not as a rival but as a person with his own insecurities, his own struggles. "I didn't know," I whispered. "We never really talked, did we? Just competed." We stayed up for hours after that, the pillow wall gradually dismantled as we moved closer to hear each other in the storm. Jackson told me about his father's expectations, how he'd never felt good enough despite his success. I told him about growing up as the only Asian kid in my Midwest town, always feeling like I had to work twice as hard to be seen. "My mother wanted me to be a doctor," I admitted. "She still introduces me as her daughter who does something with computers." Jackson laughed. "My dad still asks when I'm going to get a real job like my brother the surgeon." Somewhere between sharing childhood stories and professional disappointments, the animosity between us dissolved. I saw Jackson clearly for the first time, not as the obstacle to my success, but as someone fighting his own battles, someone with depth and humor and vulnerability. When I woke the next morning, the pillows were gone, and Jackson's arm was draped over my waist. I froze, not from discomfort but from the strange realization that it felt right somehow. I carefully moved away, my heart racing with confusion. In the light of day, we were awkward again, but differently now. He smiled at me over coffee, a real smile that reached his eyes. We walked to the client meeting together, no longer enemies but not quite friends either, existing in some new, undefined space. And then disaster struck. Our presentation files were corrupted. The backup wouldn't load. We had 30 minutes before the meeting and nothing to show. "We'll have to wing it," Jackson said, looking pale. "We can't just wing a presentation to Technovate. This account is worth millions. We don't have a choice, Maya." He ran his hands through his hair. Unless what? Unless we combine our individual presentations. I have mine on my laptop. You have yours, right? I nodded slowly. But they're completely different approaches. Maybe that's our strength, he said. 2 perspectives, unified vision. Isn't that what our boss wanted? We spent 20 frantic minutes merging our ideas, building off each other in a way we never had before. When we walked into that boardroom, something had changed between us. We presented as a team, seamlessly picking up where the other left off, strengthening each other's points instead of competing. The Technovate executives were impressed. "We've seen a dozen agencies this week," their CEO said. "You're the first ones who seem to genuinely collaborate rather than just talk about collaboration." We won the account. On the flight home, the awkwardness returned, but now it was charged with something else, possibility. "So what happens now?" I asked as we waited for our luggage. Jackson looked at me thoughtfully. "I think we try something new. Partnership instead of competition." "I'm not sure I know how to do that," I admitted. "Me neither. But Seattle proved we're better together than apart." 3 months later, our division's revenue had doubled. Our teams merged, feeding off the creative energy that sparked when Jackson and I worked together. We still argued, passionately, frequently, but now it was to make the work better, not to prove who was superior. And somewhere along the way, those arguments started ending differently. The first time he kissed me was after a particularly heated debate about user experience design. One moment we were standing in my office, voices raised, the next his hands were cupping my face and everything else disappeared. "I've wanted to do that since Seattle," he confessed, looking as surprised as I felt. "I've wanted to let you," I replied. It wasn't easy, navigating from enemies to colleagues to something more. We kept our relationship private at work, determined to maintain the professional respect we'd both fought for. But after hours, we discovered all the things we'd missed while busy hating each other: his passion for obscure documentaries, my collection of vintage cameras, his terrible cooking skills, my fear of heights. 1 year after that rainy night in Seattle, Jackson took me back to the same hotel, the same room. This time, there was no pillow wall, no pretense of professional distance. He got down on one knee beside the bed where we'd first truly seen each other. "I hated you because it was easier than admitting I was falling for you," he said, opening a small velvet box. "I don't want to waste any more time on the wrong emotions." I said yes, of course. How could I not? The man I once considered my greatest obstacle had become my greatest champion, my partner in every sense. So that's our story, from corporate enemies to reluctant roommates to lovers. All because of one rainstorm, one booking error, and one night that forced us to finally see each other as people rather than rivals. They say the line between love and hate is thin. What they don't tell you is that crossing that line can lead to the kind of love that's stronger because it was forged in fire, the kind that comes after seeing someone at their worst and choosing them anyway. If there's someone in your life you think you hate, maybe ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Sometimes, what looks like an enemy is actually your future waiting for you to be brave enough to see it. If you enjoyed our story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life love stories that prove happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. And remember, sometimes the wrong turn leads exactly where you're meant to be.